Hello and welcome to The Connected Mindset. I'm your host, Greg Tomczyk, and each week we bring you the stories and strategies to help connect you to your wildest dreams. Today's episode is presented by Valor Cybersecurity, simplified cybersecurity solutions for your business. Today's guest is somebody that I'm extremely excited to bring on the show. Spencer Snedecor III is somebody that came into my life when I needed both my mindset and my business shaken up to put it on the right path. Spencer's been part of multiple exits, helping commercialize innovative solutions in the technology space, and now serves as an executive coach to founders as well as mature businesses as they get their business to the next step. He's able to really shift mindsets when it comes to creating value. And I know he's going to bring that to you today to give you some tactical strategies that you can implement today and going forward. So without further ado, let's dive in. Over the course of my life and career, I've discovered the power of consciously investing in mindset and personal development. It has been a true game changer for me in my personal and professional life, and I'm extremely excited that you decided to join us today to take one step forward in your own life. Most of my breakthroughs have come from one-on-one conversations. We created this show to bring you those unfiltered conversations each and every week. Spencer, thanks so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Greg. It's great to be with you today.
Absolutely. Looking forward to diving in. We have a lot of ground to cover. You've been a hugely impactful person in my life and looking forward to bringing that to the wider audience here. I think one of the things that we discussed early on, common times in our business, we're very kind of put into a box, with our specialty, with the thing that we want to really bring to the world. And I think one of the things that really hit home with me is kind of zooming out and having some thinking time, making sure we're kind of seeing things from a high level and then kind of dive into our business and use, some of those lessons. And I think you've seen that through your career and the different product solutions that you've put out into the world. And you've been able to be that person who can kind of zoom out and have everybody at the table kind of focus on that thinking time. So I want to start off with kind of that subject, your thoughts on thinking time, why it doesn't happen enough, and what people that are listening in today can kind of use to, put that into their life, put that into their business.
Well, it's a great topic to begin with. I think that critical thought process and taking the time to proactively engage in that is not only required for success in business, but I think it makes you a healthy professional when you carve out that time to really think about all your different options. For me, growing up in the technology world over the past 35 plus years and being in the market through so many different evolutionary technologies from PC computing to personal device, smartphone computing, and now all the way to cloud computing, there's been a constant theme of trying to figure out the best way to monetize. From my perspective, how do you make money growing a business? How do you take your business to address problems that people understand that they have and figure out a way that you can do it profitably and provide value not only to your customers, but to yourself. And many times it just requires that you sit down and think through what your options are. And probably one of the best lessons that I learned early on, I was involved with a couple of different freeware type technologies where you give it away for free and then you have to figure out how do you convert it to make money with it to obviously stay in business. And when you are faced with something that people like and use and there's a free aspect, how do you change that perspective and how do you build value around that? There's different things that you should go through to think through all your different options. And what I often find is when people are in the heat of the battle, in the heat of the moment, they are reactive. And that's a good thing, to be reactive, to try to think on your feet as quickly as you can. But there's no substitute for the other side of that coin, which is being proactive and just carving out some time to think through your options. I know when you and I first started working together, you were in the heat of the moment with some disappointing results to some business proposals, and trying to figure out how you could correct course midstream. And there's certainly things you learn to do and you can work on in midstream if you're aware of your situation, and try to handle the objection or change course to meet the customer's needs, etc. But the reality is, when the dust settles from that particular fire at the moment, it's incumbent upon you to figure out where you just will set aside some time to think through your overall business, your overall state of mind, and do it in such a manner that you have the time to reflect and think through the options proactively, as opposed to being reactive.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it really sets the tone for this discussion. We either react or we respond. Common times the reaction is very reactive and it's very kind of uncontrolled. But the response is very, I'm in control of this outcome, and I can kind of do it in a proactive manner by that preparation, but also making sure that I kind of take a step back to say, what am I really doing here, and how can I create the best possible outcome? So I think that's critical for the audience here. Oftentimes we're just in doing mode. We're constantly, we're running, and we don't take the time to kind of stretch and think about, our form and things of that nature. So I think that's something that's critical. I'd love to dive into that kind of, the freeware to paid aspect, and, how you kind of shift people's mind around that, because I think that's critical, especially in the business that you were in. It was so early on. You had to kind of educate the customer, give them something for free so they could touch and feel it and really experience it. And then say, we want to find a way to really, bring more value to this so people want to pay for it, or change the mindset with the customer to help them bridge that gap between, this is something that I value, so I will put my monetary assets to it.
Sure. Well, the main event and opportunity that shaped my professional career was getting involved with pretty good privacy encryption, PGP encryption, which was released to the world in the late 90s by a gentleman named Phil Zimmerman, an academic who created PGP. At the time, it was published open source code so that you could have peer review to understand the algorithms and the encryption methodologies behind it, that would enable you to have peace of mind as to its strength. And at the time, it was considered to be unbreakable. It was given away as a free utility tool that you could use to encrypt your digital work product, whether it be email or files, etc. And it was individuals, built around public key cryptography. And the reality was it early on, in the days of the internet taking over, in the early 2000s, people quickly became concerned about, well, if I have certain confidential information or proprietary work product, etc., I want to keep it private. I don't want people to be able to intercept it or snoop on it, or read what I'm writing in email, or read about the unique patent opportunity that I have, or whatever. And so the technology was initially given away for free, and that was great for individuals. But as we evolved, and there was a requirement to how do we monetize this and make money, we spent a lot of time thinking about how we were going to make money with the product. And I was fortunate enough to be a member of the initial management team that brought PGP to the marketplace. And we came up with the idea that we should, to be successful selling it to corporate customers on a global basis, there would be some ease of use provided to be able to manage keys and mandate policy that people had to use the encryption, and they had to use, they had to post their public keys on a server that could be used in concert with directory services to make it easy for the technology to be used en masse. And as a result, when we talked to the corporate customers, they said, I would really like to use, I think my people should be using this to protect our corporate intellectual property. But the reality is, when it's just out there all over the place, I have no control over it. And how do I know if they're using encryption when they should be or they're not, et cetera? And so by developing a technology that enabled policy enforcement at the mail gateway in this particular case, we came up with a value proposition that was unique and that people saw the value in and were willing to pay for. So yes, the individuals could use PGP for free, and that got it out there in the marketplace. But in a different setting, using that technology in the corporate larger setting, where they wanted to manage the keys and manage policy to ensure that their employees were using the encryption in a certain way, we came up with the idea of having a policy management server, and that's what you paid for. And so there was an upsell process that enabled us to ramp the revenues and drive the revenues, and we were able to successfully convert what had traditionally been a freeware product to a payware product. And that technology has been bought and sold a couple of times in the open market through mergers and acquisitions. But today it's owned and controlled by Broadcom, who bought Symantec.
Yeah, Symantec's a huge company now, and they're on a lot of the machines that we depend on today. So it's pretty impressive to be there.
And that's another interesting legacy product, in that Symantec as a company sadly no longer exists. It's been about all the products from the antivirus and the PGP and the different aspects. They've all been acquired and owned by Broadcom, most of them. Mm-hmm. So there's their legacy out there. They're marketed and sold and maintained by a larger corporate entity.
Yeah, one of the things I saw the other day was that there's not a market for startup ideas, and kind of how critical the bridge is between that idea of kind of, pretty good privacy, all the way to the commercialization of it and kind of starting to sell that product or solution. And anything you kind of learned as common themes from, that, you guys knew you had a great product that people needed, but getting it into the hands and creating that policy server, anything you saw in between that process that really stuck out to you, that you really were able to leverage as you went on to different endeavors?
Well, there's a consistent theme, and that's a very good question. When I work with a lot of early stage entrepreneurs and advise them and mentor many of them, as an entrepreneur, you identify a problem that you think people want to solve. And the value of that problem being solved correlates directly to how quickly your solution is adopted and how much people will pay for it. If it's a pressing, urgent problem that people easily recognize and have quantified the impact to their business, then you have a unique opportunity to position your value proposition as something that they must have, and it's justifiable relative to the expense that you're asking them to pay. If I understand that I have a $1 million problem a year in a certain business process, and you've got a new technological solution or business solution that addresses that problem and impacts me having to spend that money or save that money, then I'm going to be much more receptive to paying you some money to license or use your product or solution, because I can directly see how it corresponds to my problem that I have. So there's an adage that I would often share, especially with early first-time entrepreneurs in the technology space, is people don't buy technology for technology's sake. It's in our lives, in everything we do today. We can't, everybody has their smartphone, and everybody is, tethered to it in some form or fashion. And we all have our way of leveraging it to our benefit. but it costs you money to engage on that. So you're making a value judgment as a consumer as to, well, the money I spend every month with a cell phone carrier or buying the phone in the first place, it's worth it because I have access to do certain things in my daily life. And so whenever you come up with a new product or service or solution, you want to make sure that it's tied to, if your goal is to make money with it, you want to make sure that it's tied to a defined problem or monetary economic opportunity that you can show demonstrable impact, that people are going to have that light bulb moment where they're going to go, oh, I get it. I need to have this. I want to have this.
Yeah, and what do you think that takes from the buyer's standpoint? Does it always have to connect to ROI? This is something, we always talk about in cybersecurity. It's not always a revenue generating outcome, but it's a revenue protection outcome. What have you seen in kind of your experience there with how the buyer connects to actually spending their value for receiving value? Does it have to connect to ROI, or can it be something deeper?
That's a really good question. The answer is it depends how you define ROI, return on investment. Most people quickly draw the conclusion that return on investment has to equal dollars and cents some way, somehow. And that is usually a large part of it. But sometimes you'll have situations where people aren't motivated by dollars and cents directly. They might be motivated by, in a particular case with cybersecurity services, as you and I have talked, they're motivated by protecting their brand. They're motivated by protecting their other services, which there may not be a direct link to dollars and cents that they are concerned about. So you have to ask the questions of your target customers, your prospects, to understand what is the value that they expect by using your good or service. And once you understand what their definition of value is, then you have to think through how you're going to position your solution such that they understand and agree that there's value in using what you're trying to sell them or service them with. They see the value and therefore they want to engage, right? So people only buy for one of two reasons I've grown to appreciate in the world of sales, leading sales. They either want to buy something because they have to, or they want to. And when you have to buy something, it's usually it's mandated, it's compliance, it's legally government required, whatever. It's in many ways it's like buying life insurance. Everybody knows they really should have some, but they're kind of loath to really want to engage to evaluate it and buy it. So it can be a begrudging type situation unless you have a market message that connects people, that engages them in the topic and gets them to understand to the point where you're viewed as a consultative expert in your field. And if you're making a suggestion that you should have this type of additional service or product, then they're going to be receptive to saying, okay, I'll buy that. Okay. The other side of that coin is they want to buy it. Okay. And that is where they see, usually they see clear return on investment. And one of the easiest ways of that is to have hard dollars and cents that you can show your prospects that if you pay X for my product or service, you'll achieve Y in return. And when people can see that kind of analysis, they're quick. Most people are quick to rationally engage and make a decision to purchase your product or your service.
Yeah, I think it comes down to that mentality of, the buying process, which I think is often complicated, but you broke it down in a pretty clear way. You either have to do it or you want to do it.
Right.
And that's the simple way to put it at the end of the day. And you have to be solving a problem, like you said.
And it's a challenge in today's market because over the last 10 or so years, especially for the younger entrepreneurs, we've kind of risen up in the business ecosystem where so much is, the perception is so much of the goods and services are available for free, quote unquote. It can warp your perception as to how you position your good or service. And at the end of the day, if you're beholden to your investors, whether you're self-funded or you have outside investors, you have to acknowledge that you've got to have a proper business plan in place that can drive revenues such that it covers more than just your costs. We're in it for a profit, to make money. Okay. And from that perspective, you really need to, this gets back to the beginning of this conversation on, thinking through your options and thinking through your market and taking a look at what you're doing, how you're doing it, and who your target customer is, what their response will be, and how you want to engage them to, at the end of the day, make it a win-win, that they get what they want and you get what you want, so that you're able to be a successful business that has staying power.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of so painful and so, difficult, to build a company because there's so many dynamics at play, and you're trying to get the right people in there. You're trying to make sure your solution matches the customer. You're getting feedback. You're trying to make a profit, as you mentioned. So there's so many things kind of working together that have to be fit, all kind of piece by piece to build a company that sustains. And one of the things you mentioned to me early on is kind of the 3 or 4 P's around predictability. And that's something that I didn't really see in past companies that I was at, trying to build that predictability. Can you talk a little bit about kind of those P's that you mentioned early on to me? And that's one of the things that really clicked in my head on, we know people need cybersecurity, but how do we intentionally build, the right model that's going to get us to be able to continue to grow at a pace that we want to see?
Yes, I think you're on to a good topic to talk about, because it's more than just a cybersecurity service. You could be selling widgets or coffee or, some kind of new SaaS software solution or whatever, parts for a ship. At the end of the day, my guidance and counsel with the companies that I work with, it's what I call it the ABLE part of your business plan, ABLE. And that is your process repeatable? I mean, anybody can come up with a product or service and sell it one time. Okay. But can you repeat that sales process? Is the market such that it's repeatable? The second piece is it predictable? Are you able to predict with reasonable accuracy when they're going to buy something or you're going to be successful? Obviously, you've got a business to run, you've got payroll to make, you've got investors to please, you've got employees that are wondering, I'm building all this, is it ever, is what's in it for, building the company, what's in it for me? So you have to be able to, as a leader of a company and a founder and an entrepreneur, you have to operate with predictability. You have to keep that. So you have to be predictable. The next thing that I always coach people on is it needs to be scalable. You don't want something that's just going to be a one-trick pony, one and done. It's very difficult to maintain and keep your lights on when you don't have something that's sustainable. So, is it sustainable? Does it have growth capabilities? Is the market opportunity there that you can really build something? So from there, you get from scale to, then you get to the last two are sustainability and value. Is it sustainable and is it valuable? And value obviously is in the eye of the beholder. If you're an entrepreneur and you're self-funded and you don't have to answer anybody other than to yourself, and your mission is to be very altruistic and give back to the market or whatever, then value is in the eye of the beholder. It's your business. That's great. But if you have outside investors, whether it's friends and family or it's a venture capitalist, they're going to define value very differently And you need to be attuned with it, how you're building that value. So is the business valuable? And so if you do all these three things and you focus on them and take the time to think through how your operational business plan is in place to support this, do I have a process that's repeatable? Is my process predictable? Is it scalable? Is it sustainable? And is it valuable? And if you do all those three things and you master that as an entrepreneur, you can become incredibly successful and control your destiny, which is really why most people go into business in the first place.
Yeah, it's interesting. The ables, it enables the business to have longevity. It enables the business to grow in a way that we envision when we first start the company. We know this problem exists. We want to build something, that gets it there. But that bridge, as I kind of mentioned earlier, is it's so long and kind of complex, and there's a lot of different confusing aspects of that bridge between idea and actually, selling that first one, or, really getting to the point where you're like, my company is now at a place where I'm more comfortable with, innovating and doing things that are a little bit unconventional to kind of shift the market.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's a huge one, I think, for the audience, whether you're starting a company now or have had a company for 20 years. I think we have to kind of, go back to that thinking time. I think that we started with, and kind of look at things a little bit differently and evolve the business as the market comes together, but as more information comes out on better, more focused ways to build companies. And I think you hit that nail on the head from that standpoint.
I would offer to segue into an area that I'm very passionate about, relative to when you consider how you build your business value proposition to, find a solution that is of value to your target customers. I advocate practicing what I call the 3 L's. And those are to look, listen, and learn. And I think that when you practice the 3 L's on a regular, disciplined basis, it keeps your mind sharp, and it keeps your business plan really sharp and focused, because you're constantly looking at your market, your target prospects, you're listening to what people are saying, and you're learning. You can learn from competition. You can learn from other market influences. Most importantly, you learn from your mistakes, because I like to say the only bad decision is no decision. And if you become paralyzed through your analysis process and you don't ever make a decision, it can really impact your opportunity to learn and to really grow, which positions you for ongoing success.
Absolutely. One of the things I like to say, and it was analogy from baseball, is you can use lessons either as a blessing or a curse. And I think a lot of times we use lessons as a curse, just because it's, holy cow, I made this mistake. It was the worst thing that ever happened, and I'm never going to get over it. And we get into this hurricane of negativity. But you're alluding to the key point that in order to grow a company, you have to use them as lessons. Because if you're just constantly looking in the rearview mirror, you can't really, you're not looking, you're not listening, you're not learning, because you're so focused on trying to correct that thing that happened and using it as a curse rather than a potential blessing for where your business or where your life is headed at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I think that I would add to that it's good to see on the East Coast. I've been East Coast oriented all of my life. I was fortunate enough that 30 years ago, I was able to catch on with Silicon Valley based startup kind of companies. So I experienced the ecosystem where failure was expected, and you learn from failure in Silicon Valley. And on the East Coast, that historically has been frowned upon, that if you strike out, you're a failure. Okay, to use a baseball analogy. Whereas what you would know with your baseball career, well, what you just learned is what kind of pitch the pitcher's going to throw, so the next time you'll be prepared for it. Okay, and so the what I have grown to really appreciate, and I've been very pleased to see in the startup ecosystem as I'm involved helping entrepreneurs around the country. In startup organizations around like the 757 startup scene here in Hampton Roads, or I'm a longtime member of the Research Triangle Park, North Carolina startup community. Those communities are now in the in the current time are much more forgiving and embracing of people who have tried something and failed, because they realize the value in the lessons learned. Okay. And so for years, it used to be that was only acceptable in Silicon Valley. In fact, one of the criteria that various investment firms would make years ago was, okay, well, if I'm going to invest in this CEO, this founding management team, how many failures have they had? How much have they learned so far? So the probability is pretty good that if I invest in them this time, they'll apply those lessons learned, and they won't be as inclined to fail versus somebody that had never experienced that before. It was something to consider. That line of thinking never used to be considered on the East Coast. In fact, it was just the total opposite of that. If you had a failure, then you were somehow, that's not going to be anything acceptable, and we could never invest in that person, or you'd never want to have that person speak in front of a group because, my goodness, they failed, and et cetera. So I think what's come about as the internet has come of age, as small business entrepreneurialism has come of age, and all these different accelerators are out there, the lessons that we're able to teach and the mentorship that the old guys such as myself are able to offer is, we got where we are, and we have the as I like to say, we have the gray hair on our head and the scars on our back because we survived and we learned and we adapted. Okay, and those are very, very important lessons to learn, and it makes you a much better entrepreneur going forward.
Yeah, I used to tell players kind of that failure fitness. You're exercising that muscle of failing. Oftentimes, as I saw people rise through the minor league and the major league system within Major League Baseball, the guys that were able to kind of fail a little bit early on and then get up to the top, you realize when failure came, they were much more composed. But the people that were successful through high school, through college, up to the major leagues, oftentimes when that failure first hit them, it kind of, they crumbled because they weren't, fit in that aspect, which I think is very transferable to entrepreneurship. I still don't see many venture capital companies, private equity companies value that as a character trait. But, with that, do you see a consistent kind of valuation of the entrepreneur from a venture capital investor standpoint? And do you think that failure fitness, that past track record of potential, failures that turn into lessons, do you see that as a part of the criteria, whether you're investing or you see other investors putting their kind of value into folks?
That's a really good question, and I think the answer is, for the astute, experienced, worldly investor, they're absolutely going to value that. And in particular, this ties back to our initial talk line about critical thought process and being reactive versus proactive. There's a time and a place. I personally think people don't spend enough time being proactive in their thought process, thinking through the different aspects. And that, I would submit, that's a learned behavior. And we talked about that earlier today. Or a disciplined behavior where you got to work it into your routine to just proactively take time to think about what's going on. But the value in the different failures or the objections, and failures come in all different sizes. If you're in sales and you had the greatest product that meets a need and everybody knows they need to meet the need, and you've got a great value proposition, a wonderful marketing pitch, and you go and you make your pitch, but unfortunately the guy says, nope, I'm not buying, or the lady says, no, I'm not buying. So that's a failure. You didn't accomplish your goal. But what did you learn from that? Okay, and it's what you learn and how you package that that makes you that much stronger to come back at it. Okay. And then you become a much better reactive thinker, because to react in the heat of the moment and course correct or handle the objection, you're having to pull from those life experiences that you've had before. Okay. And there's probably a great analogy here as I'm thinking and talking about this to your experience with baseball, in that if you have this opportunity to be up against a certain pitcher and you understand what kind of pitches they're going to throw and the speed at which it's coming, you'll, as a batter, you'll get a chance to become more prepared, and you'll have a higher probability of getting a hit against that pitcher the next time you see them. Okay. And so you take life's experiences, what is coming at you, and you internalize it to the point where you make it beneficial to help you succeed in your goals. And that's the value of kind of getting knocked down and getting back up on your feet quickly.
What kind of brought you to have that light bulb moment? And we don't have to dive into, I know it's multiple experiences, multiple kind of, situations that brought you to that, but I still feel like, a lot of the folks that, I interact with periodically are still trying to come to that enlightenment, that realization of, we all talk about it, kind of using your lessons and, using them as blessings or things that elevate you. But was there anything that kind of either happened or some consistencies that you found through your career that said, holy cow, I'm going to really start using some of these, obstacles and pain points to create a better, outcome or future in your own mindset?
Well, that's a really good question. And for me personally, I'm cut out of the sales cloth. So I was when I graduated from the University of Maryland, I was hired by Xerox Corporation, and in the '80s, Xerox was known as one of the sales and marketing, expert companies that you wanted to work for, and they would train you to be the best. I actually was fortunate enough in my Xerox career to spend 2 years as a Xerox sales school instructor in Leesburg, Virginia, teaching sales training, and so it becomes ingrained in your professional DNA. And from that perspective, then if you're going to be successful selling, you've got to handle objections. And if you're going to be motivated to be at the top of your craft and to climb the ladder to be, whether it's the #1 sales rep or the #1 pitcher on a ball team, you've got to perfect your craft and you've got to handle those objections. Okay. So I don't think anybody starts a business with the idea that they're going to be second best and they just want to make enough money to pay the bills. I think everybody goes into it thinking, I've got something unique. I know I'm uniquely gifted. I've got a unique service. I've got the best. I am the best. I want to be the best. Okay. It just takes a commitment to put yourself out there and to learn from your experiences. And from my perspective, early on, it was sort of ingrained that, well, if you're in sales, of course, you want to be at the top of the stack ranking. You want to be in you want to be in the top 1% of all the Xerox salespeople, and that made an indelible impression upon me. And then once I took the jump to startups, it was, well, I have a family to support. We need to be successful. I've got investors. I've got employees that are joining me in this venture. And so you have to kind of dig deep to your gut to say, I will succeed. I will figure something out. That's not to say you don't get your nose bloodied and you fall on your face from time to time, but you got to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and be driven to say, I can do this. I'm getting back in the fight. I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I think that was Mike Tyson.
Absolutely.
But I think it's incredible that mindset, I think, is so important. And one of the ways we like to round out the show is, kind of get your thoughts on, top 2, top 3 mindsets that, anybody needs to be successful in today's world. Obviously, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of moving parts. I think that consistency of, it's resilience, but it's, making sure you have the right incentives at play. Any other mindsets that stick out that you would, recommend really to anybody across the board? You've built a great life. You've seen great success in business. And, I know you've seen consistencies that you recommend. You've given us a lot to walk away with today. But any other kind of mindsets you would suggest just for the person looking to learn and get themselves to the next step in their life or in their business?
I think I would sum it up with this, that at the end of the day, people talk about work-life balance, but you really have to focus. Number one, you have to understand what that means to you as an individual. And then you really have to keep it top of mind to focus on that. I would submit that it starts with a healthy being, a healthy person. You've got to be spiritually healthy and right with yourself. If you don't have your mental health, you don't have, in my opinion, you're severely handicapped to really achieve any kind of success. You've got to be mentally right upstairs. And a lot of that then leads to your emotional centeredness, however you define that. If you're married and you have a spouse, if you have a partner, you have a family, whatever, you've got to keep all of that in proper context and perspective. Physically fit, you need to exercise not only your mind but your entire body, and then intellectually challenged. Engage. We talked through about my 3 L's earlier: the look, listen, and learn. If you're there's an old saying: if you're not learning, you're not earning. Because when you learn new things, you find new opportunities, new ways to improve your own personal performance or your business performance, etc. But when you add all that up, it all goes into hopefully making you a very successful professional. But the job is a means to the end, right? And at the end of the day, it's your own personal happiness that kind of keeps you centered and keeps you engaged. I mean, I enjoy what I do. I enjoy being out working with small companies. I enjoy working with executive management teams and specifically CEOs and working through different business issues and challenges. It's something new. It keeps me fresh. It gives me the opportunity to exercise my mind. It also allows me to share the wisdom that I've gained through all the years in the workforce and the successes that I've had. But equally as important, pull from the experiences that I failed at, because through failure you become stronger, right? So bottom line is, personal happiness. It comes down to work-life balance. That means a little bit something different for everybody. But I think if you're spiritually, emotionally, physically, and intellectually rounded as an individual, you have a much higher probability of being successful in life and successful in your career, and enabling your success. So that's what I would summarize with.
Yeah, you talked a lot about the balls that we're all trying to keep in the air, the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the intellectual. We're always trying to kind of balance those and connect them in the right, equation for us at that time. And it's not the same for everybody. And I think that's what makes it complex. Your life is going to be different than mine, different from the person next door. So we have to kind of take that into equation, take what works for somebody potentially and try to integrate it into our life, get rid of the things that aren't working and really double down on the things that are working. You started with those internal aspects, the mental, the intellectual, the emotional, which I think, what's going on our internal side is what we bring to the world, whether we believe it or not, which I think is critical. And it's a part of why we created this show, to help people connect to those mindsets around, those 4 aspects of life. So kind of rounding things out, one of the questions we like to ask everybody, kind of concluding the show, is, what does being connected mean to you, and kind of how you live your life?
That's a fabulous question. I'm glad you put that in all of your different podcasts. So connectivity to me, as I look at being in the professional world for all these years, connectivity for me is the ability to reach and stay in touch with different people that I've been fortunate enough to work with and socialize with over the years. And I've had global responsibilities in my career, and I've been fortunate to travel to different continents for business deals. But along the way, then you learn about different cultures, you learn about different people, and you learn and you meet fascinating people who have different points of view, different personal values, different cultural values, etc. So being connected to me, and one of the things I enjoy about LinkedIn and these type of forums by way of LinkedIn is I can stay in touch with a lot of those different contacts that I've made over the years. And it's gratifying to hear from friends in the UK, or hear from friends in Australia, or hear from friends in South America, whatever, Japan, etc., that I've had the opportunity to work with and then get to know. And I think that it continues to help me learn and build my intellectual capacity. When you're connected to different people in different parts of the world, and you're connected through different organizations, it definitely helps keep your perspective fresh, and gives you, I think, a much more open mind, so that when you get into that proactive thought process, you're well conditioned to consider lots of different angles on what you might do with your time, how you might solve a problem, how you might advance your business, or what you might do 10 years from now when you're doing something totally different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Spencer, I just want to acknowledge you for, really sharing, the lessons you've learned, the experiences. I think that's something that, is very admirable. It's something that people need more of, people in our position, people beside you. And that's what makes the world a better place to live. I commonly talk about, a lot of times we make the same mistakes that others around us have made, and we're just kind of going around this wheel through civilization and through society. But if we can take what people have learned and really start there, and then kind of build from there, then everything becomes better around us. So I think it's incredible. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for the time. And I think the audience is really going to get a lot from this session.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been most enjoyable, and an honor to share some thoughts and wisdom with you and the audience. I wish everybody continued success, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the business community.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Spencer.
Bye.